On Sundays, one of my favorite things to do is to go to McDonald's. It's like I'm giving myself this, I love breakfast. I love breakfast food. It's this tiny little Sabbath practice that I look forward to every time I get in the vehicle and go to church. I've got a new color this year in my Bible markup system that I want to talk about today with you. So I'm Chad Brooks. I'm a pastor here in Louisiana. I make videos about the Bible, the spiritual life, and the everyday goings-ons of a pastor, and I write in my Bible. I write in my Bible quite a lot. It's kind of one of the primary things that I do. And I write in my Bible because it serves as a form of spiritual processing for me. And it's an annotation if I'm really going to talk about anything. And I get a new Bible every single year, and I start from scratch on January 1. And on December 31st, I put that Bible up. And I have just this record of my spiritual development, but also the ways that I'm always processing through things. And with that, I use just a myriad of pens, of markers, of colors, that sort of a thing. I've got a video. I'll link to it up here on my markup strategy. But I added a color this year, and that's what I want to talk about. Now, if you remember, a couple of weeks back, I made a video that really talks about the 3 colors that you need to start a Bible markup strategy. I know the colors actually don't matter, but these are the categories. Is that you need a color to write down the things that you are noticing. You need a color to mark up or to write down the things you have questions about. But then also the third one is the things that you see repetition happening. And really these serve as the very basic beginning blocks of what's called inductive Bible study. And today, what I want to talk about is this new little blue color for me. Let's see if we can focus. There we go. Yeah, this new blue color for me. This actually starts off as this brown pen that's been part of my system almost since the very beginning, which really is just a kind of a drop down from my yellow and orange, because I do it so many. The things that that I notice. So just like 3rd generation markup stuff right here. This is crazy, y'all. 3rd generation markup. So let's talk about the trickle down and how the trickle down leads to me making the decision. I think it's time to have a completely new color for something. So we start off, remember, with the things that we notice. And I use orange and yellow because this is the thing I do the most frequently. And if you look in my Bible, it's a way that I have to differentiate. So I just have 2 colors that I just try to go back and forth between the 2. That way I don't have like a page covered in yellow or a page covered in orange. They mean the exact same thing. And so it's just stuff that I notice. And actually there's a little bit of repetition, honestly, if I'm going to think about this. Yeah, there's a little bit of repetition in this, but what it goes on is when I first started marking up my Bible, when I was reading in the book of Joshua, in Deuteronomy, the Pentateuch, just kind of those historical books, that there is this idea of the dwelling place of God. It also shows back up in Revelation chapter 21. All these things are kind of like primary theological interests for me as a pastor, but also as what I call a pastor scholar, someone who thinks about and writes about the Bible in a way that's just deeper than just sermons. And so I got this brown color. I said, this brown color is going to be for places where God says, I'm going to dwell with my people. I'm going to make my home among them. And for a couple of years, this brown color, it sufficed inside of what I was doing. And then last year, as I read the Psalms, I started using this more and more in ways that were a little outside of like the Pentateuchial, whatever. I just made up a word right there. But whatever boundaries there were of this original markup, which was, like I said, in the Pentateuch, and then in Joshua, and then in Revelation, just kind of there. I began to go outside of the boundaries, and I realized, something else is going on here. Now, I also have, remember I said pastor scholar, I also have like a handful of projects that I finally made the decision that I'm not going to sit and wait on for a chance to think about and to write about. I'm actually just going to just go forward and just start kind of pushing forward into those things this year. And one of those is the idea of the presence of God. And I'm fascinated with the presence of God in multiple ways. I'm fascinated with the presence of God through the language of revival and what that means. I'm fascinated with the idea of the presence of God as a thing to be personally experienced, as a place for emotional and mental and supernatural and psychological healing, but also as a place of clarity and discernment. And then you have the whole presence of God from a perspective of a worship. And what I found myself doing in the Psalms was, as I was marking it up, just really in the Psalms, I found myself using this brown color to mark those things up, and knowing especially that I want to do just some kind of larger and deeper work on the presence of God this year. I found myself towards the end of December saying, I think that this needs its own color to differentiate itself, because the whole dwelling with God language is something that's pretty core, pretty primary to the way I think, the way I read, the way I'm interested. But the presence of God is big enough of a differentiation between where it needs its own color. And then also you might be noticing, Chad, you've got a little tiny marker and then you've got a highlighter. And there's a reason for this. I've got a handful of these markers inside of my toolkit that I use to mark up my Bible. Now, I've gone through this system in other places, but just kind of quickly, like I've got a color for covenant. I've got a color for idolatry. I've got a color for worship. I've got a color for when there's, repetitious stuff within the same pericope. I've got a color for faithfulness. I've got my color for dwelling with God. I've got my color for sin. And I've got a color for sanctification, holiness. This is where I use markers or pens and not highlighters, is when I want to just mark something in my Bible. I don't necessarily feel the need to write a note about it. If I'm going to use a highlighter, what that means is I am going to write a note about it. And so not only was I realizing I was marking stuff up in Psalms with my dwelling with God color, but I was also leaving a note almost every single time. So that's when I realized, Chad, the time has come for you to find a new color to use in your Bible markup system. And the color doesn't matter. This was just one of the things I had in my giant bag full of highlighters that I use for other things. And it was distinctive enough from the rest of the colors where I know it would fit in. But that's it. That's my new color. That's why I added a new color. And that's what I'm kind of hoping that new color does, as I dig deeper into this idea of the presence of God for a couple of different longer form writing projects. Now, here's how you can be aware of that sort of thing. If that sort of thing starts happening, is this: subscribe down below to my Monday morning email list. Now, typically what that email is just an aggregation of things I have read about, enjoyed, thought about, want to share from across the internet. It could be religious stuff, Bible stuff. It could be just social theory. It could be some music. It could be a channel on YouTube that plays obscure, like French lounge music from the 1960s on vinyl. I share all sorts of things through there. But one of the things I'm doing is I'm going to start shifting that Monday email to not just be an aggregate of random things that I enjoyed and I'm thinking about, but the things that are informing the ways and processes that I'm thinking currently. And I'm also going to be writing a little bit more in that Monday email that relaunches next week. It's been dormant for the year as I've been doing some clarity stuff, but I'd love to have you come and hang out and engage there with me. So until the next time, I'm Chad. I will hang out with you in the comments, and I will be back.